And we're recording. Thanks again, everyone, for joining me for another one of these interviews. We have a repeat guest. This is my week of doing repeat guests. I had Dr. Jordan Wood yesterday, who was a repeat guest. And Father, have I had you on twice before or just once before?
No, I think it was just once before. I was back at the beginning of the summer.
Yeah, that's because we've tried to get together several times. I've canceled on you. I think you canceled me once, and I don't know. It's just our schedules are crazy. But anyway, Father John Eckert from North Carolina. Father John, tell our viewers just a little bit about yourself, your parish, and well, go ahead.
You got
Yourself
it.
and your parish.
So I am pastor here at Sacred Heart in Salisbury, North Carolina. So we're about 45 minutes outside of Charlotte, and beautiful parish. It's about 1,000 families. We've got a wonderful school. I think our enrollment is up this year, which is wonderful. It's not a big school. We're at about 180 from preschool to 8th grade. And just a good mix of people. I mean, there's some deep roots of Catholicism in the area that came in the early 1850s, 60s. Parish got off the ground in 1882. We're in a new location that we moved to in 2009. Outgrew the old church downtown. We're on the outskirts of town now. We sit on about 100 acres, which is unique. Diocese has about 50 of those acres. We have 50. We've got a cemetery, the church, the school. It's a beautiful place to be. If you're ever driving through this part of North Carolina, I highly recommend you stop.
Well, and I might be someday. I can't think of why I'd be driving south because I hate Disney World, and it's the only reason people go to Florida, and they pass through North Carolina. I did go to Kitty Hawk once with a friend who has a,
and that's well worth it. I went for the first time my family's been in this area since 2006. And this summer I had a random couple days so we have one of our seminarians in the parish is ordained, and he insisted on covering for me for a few days. It was great. So I randomly had these few days off. So my dad and I drove down to the Outer Banks, went to Kitty Hawk. Oh my god, the Wright brothers are incredible. I'm embarrassed I didn't know more about them before. And
I knew
started
nothing.
the David McCullough biography. It's fantastic. I mean,
All I knew about, they put some wings on a bicycle and put an engine on it and flew for a few seconds, and I thought, well, okay, no, they were great. They were awesome.
They're fantastic.
But anyway, what I wanted to establish by having you introduce yourself is important to the conversation today, which is you're not a pastor who's like bitter and angry. You're not some embittered, either anti-Vatican II or super liberal, kind of guy who's just like the church needs to do this. Church needs you. As I said to you off camera, I've gotten such positive response from the first interview because people like listening to young priests in particular who aren't bitter, who aren't burned out, who aren't unhappy, who aren't sitting there complaining, the church, and you're running an active parish with a school with 1,000 families, and it sounds rather vibrant, and it's a Novus Ordo parish. How it could be successful with a horrible Novus Ordo mass, I have no idea. I've been told by traditionalists that that's impossible, but apparently it isn't. That's why I like your having, not to mention the fact you're a gifted guy intellectually and otherwise. So you're very interesting to listen to. Today we're going to talk about celibacy. We talked about it a little bit in our first interview. And it was basically in response to a essay on my blog I had written, which was, in memory of Damien Alfonso Bergman, who was the son of my pastor, who passed away, and it caused me to reflect. Since I go to an ordinariate parish, and my pastor is married, Father Eric Bergman. He has 10 children. 11th one died in utero of trisomy disease, a genetic disorder, and and we knew for months that this was going to happen, and it really caused me to pause and reflect on the fact that his married priesthood was more than just the church granting a concession to converts, even though I think that's part of it, a concession to converts, but that regardless of what the church thinks it's doing in giving that concession to converts, I saw a powerful positive value in the fact that my pastor was married and had children. And for the first time, even though I'm a former seminarian and decided not to be a priest precisely because of celibacy, I've always been a lifelong supporter of mandatory celibacy until I've gotten to this parish. And I don't, please don't write to me and say, that's why we should never have the ordinariates and that's why we should never have married priests, because then it causes people to question. Well, maybe it causes people to question with good reason.
Sure.
And so that was the topic of our conversation. Let's continue that conversation. And you said you've been sort of meditating and thinking more about this. So what thoughts do you want to share on this topic, just to get us started?
Well, and I appreciated, and I liked how you even called it from the beginning. You said this is more of a meditation than it is any kind of like an opinion piece or anything like that. And I think, anything that can stand and stand strong. I mean, I don't think there's any problem with like looking into like, why are we doing what we do? Just as an ancillary sort of thing. I mean, we've completely reworked our whole faith formation system here at the parish. And the reason I bring that up is just like looking at, okay, wait, why are we doing the classroom model for the kids that are not in school here, once a week, bringing in a volunteer catechist, all this? Like, why are we doing this? Like, what's the point? Is it working? And so I think, when you look at celibacy, and I think part of your meditation, I think that's been a while back, but it was really good to read that. And especially with your frustration on, okay, we got all this scandal, all these guys not living it. Why are we even doing this? Like, what's the point? And I think getting at the heart of it of, okay, what is the point of a man, giving up the great gift of a wife and children, of giving up the gift that is marriage? Why are we doing that if so many are not actually living their vows? And so it's like, well, I want to look into this more because, truth be told, yes, I am a man, like I am a celibate, and I'm striving to live it to, my wholehearted best ability. And am I frustrated when you get another scandal out of Rome and you hear about this or that? Yeah, I don't like it either. It's terrible. But on a certain level, it's like, okay, because there's...
Can I interrupt you real quick? I just want to say that I have many priest friends, and I think one of the things that is often forgotten is that the other major victim of the sex abuse crisis are faithful and devout priests such as yourself, who are loyal to their vows of celibacy, who now have to live under the stigma and the shadow that this has cast over the entire priesthood. And it's got to be a small crucifixion for many of you guys. But anyway, I just wanted to toss that out there because you mentioned the sex abuse crisis in relation to celibacy. So anyway, I interrupted. I'm sorry.
No. I'm glad you did. I mean, I'm happy to have the conversation. It's just good to talk about it. And like I said, I mean, the whole aspect, it's not so much questioning insofar as we got to tear the whole thing down. It's like, okay, wait, why are we doing this? And something like this that has managed to stick around for 2,000 years. I mean, it's not the natural thing you slide into. I mean, as you know, discerning a call to celibacy is really tough. But actually, from one of your other interviews, I loved it when you were interviewing Deacon James Keating. And actually, some of the stuff I've been reading was from him, where he's said, like,
great. He's awesome.
He's incredible. I'm kind of sad. Like, so we overlapped briefly at the Josephinum. I don't think I ever had a class from him, but I had a couple conferences with him, and they were wonderful. And I hope at some point I get to meet him, hook up with him again, because he was just phenomenal. And his writings have been great. But he said, he's like, celibacy is not like going to a restaurant in the South and you just get grits thrown in on the side. He's like, they're not grits. Like it's at the heart of what's going on. And an article I came across, I read a book called Why Celibacy by Father Carter Griffin that Emmaus Road put out. And he has all sorts of references, but there was one in there about how, like, the Blessed Mother's role in helping the priests to grow in celibacy. And he gets at the heart of, like, our Blessed Mother helping us, and he references Deus Caritas Est, and, like, we have our wounded fallen eros, like all of us do. You talk about the, libido dominandi, right? Like the difficulty in the world. We've all got it. I mean, like, we come into this, we have our own struggles, like, regardless of who or what you're attracted to. I mean, there's some of that there. And he talks about, like, it's this beautiful meditation on, and I think there was an article he references by, it's like a Monsignor Seahack. It's It's like Chik, I think.
Yeah.
But basically standing at the foot of the cross with our Blessed Mother, which, by the way, as we record this, yesterday was Our Lady of Sorrows. I mean, the gospel
Right.
fits right in.
Right
But
after
standing
Triumph of the
there,
Cross.
exactly. I mean, like, they go together so much. And so our Blessed Mother helping us to be healed in our wounded eros, to purify that to become celibate agape. And just, to think about that we, have to move to this point of Christ-like self-sacrificing love. Now, are you called to agape in the married life? Of course you are, but it's obviously in a big way directed to your wife. It's like in Ephesians about the mystery of Christ's love for his church and being an icon of that, in the family and bringing a new life. And I think, it's like the gift of celibacy to the church is to show it's like, okay, Eros needs to be cured all over the place. Like,
Yeah,
it's like
really.
the constant fog all around us. But to get to that point of lived self-sacrificing love in the parish and, to do that on a day-to-day basis. And I really like this article by this Monsignor Seahack where he talks about, like it's tough to take it right now, where he says, seeing like John Paul II generation priests leaving. Like, that's not supposed to happen. They're Orthodox. Like, what is it? It's like, just
and I know
right.
a lot of them that have.
Yeah,
a lot
and
of them.
that's the scary thing. It's like, okay, this isn't just an intellectual issue here. Like, you can know that, okay, yeah, I mean, celibacy, it makes sense, but it's not. I think sometimes the danger is we fall right into the practical level and, oh, now he's more radically available. Well, you know what? Like, doctors need to be radically available, but they're married and have kids. I mean, it's not.
My pastor has 10 kids and he's radically available.
Exactly. So it's not just that availability piece. And I think it has something to do with, I'll put it this way. It sounds kind of cynical. And I remember, like, every once in a while, like, we hit a 5-10-year anniversary in the diocese. The diocesan newspaper asked us to write a reflection on, what have you learned in those years? And one of my buddies, when he had his 5th anniversary, and I was ordained in 2010, by the way, just to give you an idea of where I am in the years. Right. But I remember him saying, what's the priesthood for you? And he goes, it's the cross. And he just full stop. Yeah. But the thing, and I think, like, we all have to live the cross. It's like the exaltation of the Holy Cross on Wednesday we just celebrated. Like, yeah, that's the glory, that's the exaltation. But some of us are called to live it as celibate priests. Some of us are called to live it in the married life. And I think both absolutely have their value. And I think for some of us, like, especially, like diocesan priests, I think it's important for some of us to be in the world, not of the world, striving to live the prayer life, striving to live at the foot of the cross, and sort of like living in that, mediator place of, striving to do it. It doesn't mean that you're an alien and you're just like, you can't relate to people. But I think to actually be there and to strive to be joyful and show that it's possible. And, I'm not saying being Pollyanna, like I'm realistic, I mean, I know, I mean, I'm a fallen schmuck like everybody else, right? Like I have to go to confession frequently. I mean, it's crucial. But just one other little, like, ancillary thing from the past. We had a priest here, is like towards the end of my first year here. When I first got here, just a lot of things. We were incredibly in debt. Like I said, we sit on 100 acres. We got a church that was built in 2009. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel now. But when I got here, I mean, we're talking like $5.5 million in debt. Got a school to take care of, like all this stuff. And apparently I was showing on my face just the burdens of being the pastor. And it was an Argentinian priest who was with us for the summer. And he just looked at me, he goes, Father, he goes, are you living a double life? I'm like, no. And he goes, do you pray? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, well, then you're a good priest. Don't worry about it. I'm like, okay. Like,
there you go.
It sounds like such a bare minimum, right? But
it isn't.
It's not. It's not. And in the same way in the married life, like you got to do the same thing. I was going to
say, I would argue that sometimes if you want to get really deep, profound, spiritual, metaphysical, the essence of almost all sin is that it creates a double self within you, which quite frequently leads to a double life.
Yep.
If you don't want that old nasty self to be known publicly, you hide these things, right? And so you end up leading a double life. So I want to go back to something you said earlier about eros, because part of my meditation on this topic of celibacy is that it kind of, you're right. Eros, in many ways, is our most powerful biological urge, the sexual drive. One could argue, perhaps, if I was starving to death or I didn't have any water, that would be a far more powerful. But you have to get to that point. 2 weeks without food,
Oh, yeah.
3 weeks without, 5 days without water or something. Whereas for a lot of people, if not maybe most people, the sexual urges are there almost every day. I just think it's a common sense observation of human history that the erotic impulse in the human being is probably the most screwed up aspect of our humanity.
Sure.
This, you hear confessions. I know people, and even as a lay person, I take a catalog of every single human being in my life whose life is a continual train wreck. And I guarantee you there is some erotic dysfunction in that life at some point or another, a bad, horrible sexual relation or just a regular relation, So the point is this, that then gives celibacy, I think, a powerful witness value.
Yeah.
In the sense that there is grace to overcome this. We do have a spiritual side to us that can transform, I don't want to say get beyond, because we don't, transform our sexuality into something truly great and spiritual. And celibacy gives a witness to that. Now, I think that's the ideal, and I think that's the eschatological sign value of it, right? In heaven, there's no marriage, and we're not given in marriage, which I think is another way of saying heaven is not carnal, and there is going to be eros in our love in some sense, but it's not going to be erotic in that sexual sense.
In the purified sense, like
in the purified,
agape.
Right? Eros will be taken up into agape, and so on. Nevertheless, it's also true, given how dysfunctional the erotic is in the human animal, and how prone it is to just completely going off the rails. Is there not also then a danger in celibacy, insofar as it might be an attractant to somebody whose erotic impulses have gone off the rails, and they want to use the priesthood then as a kind of, I'm just, in other words, I'm not saying as a dodge or to hide something. I think that's often overused. Oh, they just go into the priesthood to hide their homosexuality or whatever. No, I think that's overused. I was a seminarian once, for a long time, and I don't think that was true. I think what it is that there is this belief that if I go into a white-knuckled ascetical denial of my sexuality, which I know is completely screwed up, then I can live a normal life. And maybe the best way to do that is to become a priest, because after all, I'm a devout Catholic. I believe in the church. So why not become a priest? I don't ever want to have sex anyway, because I'm so screwed up in that domain. So I'm going to get into the seminary. And these people are very good at hiding their sort of dysfunction, because they know it's wrong. And then the hard times come and they slip and fall, and bada bing, you've got the problem. What do you think of that?
I mean, I'm certainly not going to deny that that's a possibility, because I think we've seen, a lot of that over a long time. I mean, you've talked about, your time in seminary, and it wasn't exactly like the golden standard of seminary education in the U.S. Now, to be fair, I think I did go to seminary in the golden age of the seminary in the United States. I graduated from St. Louis University in 2004. Entered the seminary that fall and graduated in 2010. So spring of my first year, John Paul II passed away. Pope Benedict becomes the Holy Father. And I remember at the time thinking, who is this? Like, I didn't know background in church. I hadn't read Joseph Ratzinger. And it was like, you're not my grandpa. Like, John Paul II had been the Holy Father since I was born. Like, I just loved him. But then getting to know Pope Benedict over the years, and we went to go see him as a seminary when he was in New York in 2008, I think it was, which I loved, because he was here on his birthday and we sang it for him. And he said, to that song, I give you an applause. And we thought he said applause, but he said A plus. But it was just, just in wonderful German.
Yeah,
it was so great. But, so it's like I was there, and my first year was when they did the apostolic visitation of the seminaries. They asked me questions. I mean, I just graduated from college. I'm not Mr. Naive. The questions, I didn't know what in the world they were talking about. It just it was like sort of lifting a veil on, there's some really bad stuff. And I really wasn't exposed to it in seminary. I mean, I was blessed to have like that era in the church to be in seminary. Plus, you're talking about the heels of everything hitting the fan in 2002. They upped the requirements for admission. So, I mean, I went through background checks, scanning, psychological examinations galore just to get my foot in the door. And I didn't understand it all. But all of a sudden in those years, that's when seminary enrollment started to rise again. Now, it's back on the decline. But getting at the heart of, okay, wait, are you entering here to hide something? Are you white knuckling this? And even my first years, that's when they added a mandatory 2-year pre-theology program. So I graduated with a BA in political science and communication from St. Louis University. I'd done the philosophical requirements. I was still required to do the bachelor's in philosophy when I started at the Josephinum, because we had 2 years required pre-theology regardless. Because the way they looked at it was like, okay, can you fly below the radar for a while? Sure, but 6 years is awfully tough. And is that to say the system's perfect now? No. But I don't know. I think there's, at this point too, in our society, what the hell are you trying to hide from? Like, I mean, the stuff on Parade, I mean, it's not as though there's some public shame in, I've got this weird sexual defect. In this day and age, it's like, okay, this is more rare than that.
Well, you're kind of putting your finger now on why I sort of brought that issue up, because I think the statistics bear out that the height of the problem of sexual abuse in the Catholic Church was really, even though there's always going to be priests, there are always Protestant ministers and teachers and Boy Scout leaders and the pervy uncle next door. There's always going to be some kind of sexual abuse of children. Sadly. Yeah. But nevertheless, it does seem to have reached this crescendo in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, and is really dropping off the cliff in terms of the numbers of new cases. And therefore, it does seem to have been the massive, well, also the sex abuse crisis as it became a sensation in the media, was the product of the bishops hiding these things for decades, which allowed like 500 cases to build up in secret files, which then bankrupt the diocese when it becomes known. So, it like the Pennsylvania grand jury report came out a couple years ago, which covered 70 years. It covered 70 years.
Oh, yeah. 2008, I think, was far worse than 2002. 2002, it's like, oh, crap, we've got a problem. We got to deal with this. And it's like, yes, we're dealing with it. And then 16 years later, it's like, no, we weren't dealing with it. It's all still the way. And it just, that was so demoralizing.
So, and I went to seminary 78 to 86. Minor seminary and major seminary, and though my viewers know, and maybe my new viewers don't know, so I am a laicized deacon. I was a transitional deacon 2 months away from ordination to the priesthood when I decided, no, I'm not going to do this. This is a bad idea. Well, we won't go into why I thought it was a bad idea, but the point is, I was 7 years in right at the beginning of John Paul II's papacy, and my seminary experience was very different from your seminary experience. My seminary experience can be summed up, in fact, a very good priest friend of mine now, who I won't mention his name, and I won't even mention the seminary, although people can look it up. But he and I both came early to theologate to set up our rooms and travel reasons. And he came across the hallway to me, and we started chatting. And he goes, I just have one question for you, and I'm going to be very blunt. And I said, yeah, what's that? He goes, are you gay? And he had this angry look on his face. And so I know he wasn't propositioning me. I said, well, why are you asking me? What a rude and insensitive question to ask when we just first met. He goes, because I'm asking you that question because apparently everybody else here is, and his experience of the greeting team and then the hospitality team and so on was that these were all the gay guys who decided that They were going to be the espresso and croissant guys who were going to welcome all the new men. You know, I hate to stereotype or caricature. That was my experience of the seminary. And by the way, I went to a very orthodox, supposedly conservative seminary. So I'm not saying all this to go down memory lane, but to highlight that this was a generational thing, which causes me to wonder then are two things. Number one, what was the cause of that generational problem? And I think you've put your finger on something. Number one, there were just simply far more guys going into the seminary. There were still far more priests, and there was still a lot more sort of social standing for the church and for the priesthood. And so people had a lot of powerful motivations for becoming a priest that weren't necessarily pristine.
Sure.
Right. You know, and a lot of those props have fallen away. All right.
Oh, yeah.
By the time you get to your generation, there's only one reason to go to the seminary and to be a priest. It's because you want to be a priest, because you want to follow that path of Christ, the path of the cross. And for you, therefore, celibacy really does become this powerful and positive witness. But for a lot of guys of my generation, it really was just a white knuckling sort of thing. This is just a hoop the church makes us jump through. I know that's how I felt. That's why I often project that on everybody else. Sure. I always kind of wanted to get married, but I thought, oh, well, I really want to be a priest, and this is what the church makes me do. So I'm just going to jump through that flaming hoop and do it. You know, I'm kind of ugly and gangly anyway, so who the hell cares? And so
no, I get it. I get it. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, and I appreciated your meditation, if you want that, because it's, you know, it's an important thing to get at the heart of it all. It's like, why am I doing what I'm doing, right? Because and like so this article by this Monsignor Siak, I'll have to get you the reference, and I mean, it's just very, very good. But you know, he talks about how, you know, at the heart of like living it out, it's so easy to try to mask over the difficulties of it, right? I mean, there's so many numbing things that we have for us, like from the less sinful to the powerfully sinful in this day and age, you know, be it just wasting time on the internet, you know, to booze, to drugs, to infidelity, to pornography, to all this stuff. And it's like, no, I mean, we're called to completely devote our hearts to Christ, you know, to, and the thing I've kind of learned over the years too, I wish I'd come out of seminary with like a rock star prayer life and everything's awesome. It's taken a lot of time. I mean, I'm in my 13th year, and I've really had to learn how to make the time to pray and learn how essential that is. Because there are times, you know, and I'm sure you can imagine, I'm in a, you know, tired, it's been tough, had a tough day. Yeah. I don't want to just run over and pray. I mean, it's not like, you know, story of a soul from, although St. Therese went through her own stuff, but you know, it's like, it's not like this romantic, I float over to the church and everything's great. It's hard sometimes, but I've learned, look, I can cut time on sleep. I can cut time on eating. Like, I can cut time on exercise. I can't cut time on prayer. Like, that has to happen. And I think for us to be there in the world, in front of people too, like, I've kind of come to the realization too, like, I need to be in the church and praying. And I have like a little spot up in the sanctuary behind the celebrant's chair where I am. That's where I go to make my holy hour in the morning, and people know I'm up there. And it's fine. Like, I'm not there to show off, but they know I'm there. I've already unlocked the church.
I think that's important. I know priests who don't do that because they say, well, I don't want to look like I'm showing off. I don't want to make like I'm pretending to be John Vianney or something. I think it's very important for lay people to see their pastors, their priests praying at the church. I think that's very powerful witness.
Absolutely. And you know, think too, because I've heard you say before, you know, we're in the age of the laity. In the same way that I need to be demonstrating.
Uh-oh. Hang on.
A poor connection. Oh, are we back?
We're back. Okay. Hopefully that wasn't so long that we have to edit that out. So that's good.
It was very brief. Okay. So I was like right in the middle of the thought. Like, in the same way I was saying that I think people need to see the priest praying, and I'm devoted to my vocation. I need to see husbands and wives devoted to their vocation. Like, your fidelity is an inspiration to me, and I need you living that out. So then it's like, okay, God bless them. They've been up all night with the kids. Like, it's hard. He's got to go to work. Like, hell yeah, I got to get up early and get in there and pray. I need to do my my duty. And granted, yeah, like, okay, prayer, eventually it moves from the stage of duty to more of a delight. And hopefully so does work. I mean, it's like, the sanctification of labor. Like, hopefully you like your job and it's not all drudgery. And it's like, you got to offer that up. But there is a cross element to it where you have to deny yourself and do this. So it's like, I think the question isn't, do we just need to get rid of celibacy? It's like, no, I don't think we fix a problem with one vocation by adding another vocation to it. I think we just need to encourage people to be more faithful in the living out of their vocations.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, let's be honest here. Let's go down the reasons why some people say we should have married priests. Number one is the thing about, like you just mentioned, of vocations and fixing one vocation by adding another. And some people say, yeah, but the priest would be so much better at ministering to married people if he himself is married. I think that's partly true, but I also think it's also deceptive, because I've said, the grand myth that might be out there, but every married person knows this isn't true, is that married couples are swinging from the chandeliers, having sex 5 times a day, and the fact is it's called celibacy in the suburbs for a lot of reasons, health reasons, fatigue reasons, busyness reasons, a lot of kids reasons,
of course.
So lay people, married people, I'll say this, to a great extent, even though they do get to be intimate with one another in a way that a priest doesn't, married people have to be continent as well for long, extended stretches of time. Quite often, they too have to deal with the denial, if you will, or the rechanneling or the transforming of unfulfilled sexual desires. And the celibate priesthood gives them a model of grace and hope that shows that God's grace is strong enough for even married people to do this. I can think of no more powerful witness. I don't need to see my priest married in order to see a powerful witness of holy married people. I know a lot of holy married people. Of
course.
I don't need, I think it's a great thing that my current priest is married and holy. I don't need him to be married.
Absolutely.
All right. In order to have that example.
I like to bring up sometimes too in the confessional, because pornography is an epidemic. We know this. It's out.
Oh, it's everywhere.
There's a reason why it's like the biggest business in the United States. So, that I'm having to talk about this very frequently. And the thing I'll say to guys sometimes, because as you mentioned before about the, food and drink and all that, I like to mention to guys, like, look, here's the thing about that temptation. I get it. It's strong. I experience it sometimes myself. The beautiful thing about that temptation, you say no to that, you're not going to die. Eventually, you got to eat. You got to drink. With this one, it's going to pass. Like, it will pass. I promise. Yeah. And it's funny because sometimes I'll give that advice. And, like, if I'm starting to be, like, arrogant about my own living of it out, our Lord will hit me like, hey, it's not as easy as you think, is it there? Like, you got to be, patient in the confessional. I get it. I know it's a struggle. I'm a man, too. Even if I'm celibate, I'm not dead. But at the same time, it's like, but you can do this by the grace of God. Like, okay, shut off the darn computer, shut off the phone. If you're tempted, don't turn on a screen, because a blank screen is an unattractive screen. Go out for a walk. Like, there are things you can do. And so it's like, I get the idea of, like, you can give advice as a married man to another married man. But at the same time, I'm able to bring a perspective as a celibate.
That's right.
That you're not able to get from somewhere else, And I know I've heard before too the analogy. It's like, well, you don't need your doctor to have cancer for him to work. It's like, yeah, but marriage isn't a disease. We're trying to help each other out.
No, that's true.
But I need to be, it's like, from living close to Christ, by staying by the cross, by doing all that I can to be in union with him, and also realizing, as we talked about before, like the eros, the erotic desire, it's very strong. It's a big part of the whole world. Think about anything that's attempting to be sold to you right now. They're using sex appeal 9 times out of 10. It's very, very powerful, but to be able to step back from that and say, no, that's not the most important thing in the whole wide world, that there is something greater. I'm not saying I don't respect it. I don't love it. It can be wonderful. I have amazing parents. Like, I've been incredibly blessed. I have siblings that live their vocation beautifully. And this is the other thing too, especially priests that have siblings and get to be a part of their siblings' lives. My sister's pregnant with number 7 right now. And so when I get to go spend time with them, it's so amazing, like being there to help them get ready for school in the morning. I get some whole new insights that, it's like, of course I got to get to church on time. I'm just taking care of me. they're taking care of, all the way down, and that's not easy.
And it's important to realize too that I don't think any priest should be ordained. Any man should be ordained a priest unless he has also the desire to be a biological father and a husband.
Yeah, sure.
Because you can't be a spiritual father. Grace builds on nature; it doesn't replace it, unless you have the capacity to be a natural father.
Yeah.
And so I think that's very important. And by the way, none of this is to cast aspersions
No.
on like Eastern Rite Catholic priests that are married, ordinary. I mean, as I've said in my piece, I mean, I've come to really greatly respect that's the married priest has a charism all his own that also has a positive value. But I wanted to have you on today so we could talk about what is in fact then the positive value of celibacy. And I think you're really we're really honing in something. There's another canard that often comes up about why we should get rid of mandatory celibacy, and that is to increase vocations. And yet, Protestant denominations go screaming for clergy. I mean, there is a clergy crisis even in Eastern Orthodoxy. Even they have a married clergy. The fact is that, like I said before, there isn't the social prestige associated with being a clergy person, nor is there a lot of lucrative contracts usually coming the way of it, unless you're the pastor of a mega church, a prosperity gospel church, and you get to fly in your own private jet like Kenneth Copeland or something.
Yeah.
You're not going to make money, and there's no social prestige to it. And there's a sense of the pall and stench of death around many versions of Christianity in the United States these days. I once knew a United Church of Christ female minister, and she did not have a church of her own. She had been designated by the assembly to go around to various churches, and her ministry was the ministry of closure. She went to various communities all over the country that were fixing to close up shop, and it was her job to minister to the octogenarians and so on, the 10 of them that were still there.
Wow.
to ease them out. So I only bring that up to point out that there are problems within denominations that have married clergy, and therefore if we're just going to say we're going to wave this magic wand and say we're going to allow Catholic priests to get married and we're suddenly going to be filled with vocations, I actually think, and you can comment on this, I think if like Pope Francis came out tomorrow with a motu proprio and said priests can now get married, I think that there would be initially this great surge of married guys becoming priests, but I think that would eventually go down.
Oh yeah.
And I would wonder too how many of them would actually stay priests.
Yeah. And and the thing too, I think it'd be an interesting group to interview would be the wives of married priests. I mean, because it's
and the kids.
And the kids. I mean, that's and once again, it's not just like the radical availability part of like I can go to the hospital in the middle of the night. It's just, I mean, I live very much in a fishbowl. I mean, and like I can't imagine what that would be like for, wife and kids and how difficult that would be. And I mean, and just talking to, like, we have a gentleman in the parish who's a former, I want to say Pentecostal minister, who ended up becoming Catholic. One of ours now helps us with RCI, wonderful guy. But he said at one point, he goes, he respects and appreciates celibacy. He said when he was a Pentecostal minister, he always felt guilty when he was doing things with the church because he felt like he was neglecting his family. When he was with his family, he always felt like he was neglecting the church. And I mean, I can even feel that pull, like if family is down visiting and it's like, I feel like I need to go see them and I'm here and but yeah, it's not like it's some sort of like cure-all. I think really what we have more than a crisis that's related to celibacy, it's more of a crisis related to faith. It's like,
yes.
I mean, ultimately, like, is the faith worth laying everything down for and following our Lord? Whether that's when you're called to be a priest, a religious, a married man, a consecrated single person, like all these things, like, is Jesus Christ worth laying your whole life down for? When he looks at you and loves you and tells you that you lack one thing, are you willing to actually give that one thing up and follow him, or are you going to walk away sad? I mean, I think that's what it all gets down to. I mean, because he's calling us all to something.
I think that really is important. It gets to the heart of something important to talk about, which is now celibacy, but also then recruiting, if you will, young men to the seminary in light of the celibacy requirements. So we're told over and over again, well, you're never going to attract enough guys, never attract them. And yet there are models out there, or examples out there, of dioceses that have plenty of vocations. My own home diocese of Lincoln, Nebraska, where I grew up, I'll just briefly describe. They had a very vibrant Newman Center at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln on their campus, and a very vibrant priest who ran the Newman Center, and it was a very strong and really hopeful version of Catholicism. Was vibrant. It was on fire, and by the way, it was a Norvis Oder liturgy, 1970s, complete with guitars and St. Louis Jesuits, and yet there were students filling the church. It was standing room, so much so now they had to build a new church there that had a larger capacity. And my point is this: the year I went into the seminary, which was 1978, I went into the seminary for a tiny diocese of Lincoln, Nebraska, that has a total of 100-some thousand Catholics on the whole diocese. Okay, all of southern Nebraska, like 150,000 Catholics. That tiny little diocese sent 30 guys to the seminary.
Yeah.
We didn't all make it, but most did. Sure. And that was not an uncommon year. Lincoln was sending 20 guys to the seminary, 25, 15, 30. Year in and year out. The same with the dioceses like Arlington, Virginia, Wichita, Kansas, and I think recently even in North Carolina, perhaps.
We're growing. I think we just hit like 50 seminarians right now. I mean, we're doing great. I mean, I think a big part, it's like, you got to set the bar high. It's not. Yeah.
Youth is a time of idealism.
Yeah.
Youth is a time. So I'm riffing on what you said earlier, but it all boils down to faith. What you have to have for young people, whether you're talking campus ministry at this college or a Newman Center at that college, you need to present a Catholicism that challenges, that bites, that has teeth, because youth are looking for something bigger than themselves to commit themselves to. They want an idealism. They want that challenge to heroism. And the church has to be, therefore, a challenging church, not a lukewarm church.
Yeah.
And that, unfortunately, I think this is the appeal for a lot of young seminarians today of the hyper-traditionalist movement. All right. They see that kind of Catholicism in traditionalism, but not elsewhere.
Sure. And to be fair, because I know you've talked about this before about, it's like, who wants the banal, beige Catholicism? And unfortunately, there are a lot of parishes where it's just like, the Sunday morning, it's just, it's not great. And don't get me wrong. And I think, it's like always like striving to imitate our Lord in his perfect pulling together of, gentleness and strength. It's like he is the utterly merciful one who holds us to the highest account. It's like, you have heard it said, you shall not murder. But I tell you, if you hate anyone in your heart, it's like, who of us hasn't gotten upset in our heart? It's like, but he holds us so high. He holds us together, the mercy, and we have to hold those two together. And obviously, it's sort of in tension. It's difficult. It's, meeting the couple that needs an annulment and not just saying like, it's okay. No, it's walking through the annulment with them. It's knowing there's a process to get there. Is it going to be tough on the way? Yeah. But I mean, for goodness sakes, you go into any Catholic church, what's at the center? Jesus Christ on the cross. I mean, it's not a surprise that this is going to be difficult. It's like, it's right there. We're advertising it from the beginning. And it's only when we try to move away from that, it's like, if you're going to move away, why do any of it at all? I love that quote from Flannery O'Connor about the Eucharist. I'm sure you've heard it, where it's, she's at a dinner party and someone says, "Oh, the Eucharist, isn't it a lovely symbol?" And she said, "If it's just a symbol, then to hell with it."
Then to hell with it. Yeah.
And I think about that sometimes because, here I'm at Mass, especially on a Sunday. It's like, third Mass of the day in Spanish, language I don't know. I'm wearing these vestments. I'm distributing Holy Communion. I mean, like, if I don't really believe that this is Jesus Christ that I'm giving to people, we in the reading today from St. Paul in the letter to the Corinthians, it's like, if Jesus is risen from the dead, we're the most pitiable of all men. It's like, what am I doing? I'm dressed like a magician and handing out crackers. Like, it's stupid if it's not true, but it's true. So it's worth laying your whole life down for. And so you got to call people to the highest.
I remember once when I was still a deacon, I did a communion service for this Latino group, and I remember I rattling off this Spanish. I got done with one of the La Palabra de Dios, the Word of God, and I remember thinking to myself, that's probably the only Spanish I really understood that I was speaking right there.
Yeah.
But still, the point was, despite the clown act that I was as a Spanish speaker, I was there because Christ was there.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And it's, it's like going back to John 22. Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, I love you. Feed my sheep. It all goes together. It's like, you spend time with him, you love him, and then he sends you to them. And, there are times we're in a very incarnational church. You're in the midst of mass and the darn smoke alarm goes off because the kids overdid it on the incense. And that actually happened to us it was Holy Thursday several years back. It was probably the maddest I've been since I've been here. So it's like, come on, guys, like this is like the World Series. Don't change up the game plan when
I know a priest who once burned down his sacristy because of incense while mass was going.
I mean, we literally use it every Sunday. So it's like, come on.
Well, that's a good sign because so many parishes don't, and I'm a big fan. This is not a side note. What time is it here? Okay, we still got time. It's not a side note. I mentioned before the allure and the attractiveness of hyper-traditionalism for so many young seminarians. I get emails all the time from seminary formators who say, some say it's not a problem in their place. Others say it's a huge problem. They're all watching Taylor Marshall and they all love the traditional Latin Mass and all this kind of stuff. But I think what is attracting them to it is the sort of mystical sense of transcendence that liturgy has. Part of that is incense, part of it is chant. And I think that it's important with regard to both to get back to the conjoining of the laity and the priesthood, that sort of sacred sense to liturgy really desperately, I think, needs to be restored.
Oh, completely. And I think, and you've hit on this in the past, and I just keep referencing you. I will tell you, one of the things I really appreciate about this day and age, and your podcast in particular, I don't get a lot of time to study theology. It's like I'm always prepping for the next homily. But like I listened to your talk with Cyril O'Regan the other day.
Cyril O'Regan, yeah.
Wow. Like, it's just like it's like drinking from a fire hose, but it was excellent. But the reason I bring that up is like it's good for me. It's like I feel like I get to study when I'm like, going out to exercise, when I'm listening to the podcast, right? It's great. But I know you've mentioned before, it's like having sympathy for like a more radical traditionalist, because like, yeah, we want to go all in, and you don't want the mass, quite frankly, to feel stupid, and there's videos out there of stuff, it's like the guy blessing people with a guitar.
Oh, in Chicago.
Yeah. It's like, but the trouble is it's like, okay, the average liturgy, is it closer to that, or is it closer to lifting us up to heaven? And that's the difficult thing. Now, I'm blessed as a priest. Like when I'm in mass, 99 times out of 100, I'm the main celebrant. Like I know I'm going to be focused. I'm going to be saying the black. I'm going to be doing the red. I'm going to give it my all. I'm going to pray. And by the way, just an advice to any priest listening, I've kept a record of every mass I've said. So every intention I've ever said. So this morning was mass number 6,194 since I've been ordained. Wow. It's a beautiful thing to get to do, because I think devotion is such an important thing at the heart of any kind of renewal, because I think why people are attracted to people like Taylor Marshall, it's like he believes in what he's saying, And,
yeah, he does.
And he really and knows that this is important. It's not like, oh, it doesn't matter. It does matter. And I know ecumenism can be difficult. Like it's important. We got to talk about it. I don't think we need to beat people over the head with a club and drag them in. But at the same time, like there's this move sometimes to sort of be like, well, pick Jesus Christ or don't. And it's like, no, I mean, read John 14:6. Like, I am the way and the truth and the life. Like he is, the lens that reveals man to himself, right? I mean,
that's right.
We need that, and we've got to be all in. But at the same time, it's like, okay, we want the strength. As I said before, it's like the gentleness has to be there too. And I think it's easier to go to one side or the other, but it's like the Chestertonian paradoxical, like we don't like pink. We have a healthy disregard of pink. We want white and we want red and we want them at their fullest, and like we need that. And I think, some of my difficult, like I don't know the Latin Mass. I don't celebrate the Latin Mass. I have friends who do, and they love it, and I respect them, and I'm glad. But I think some of this, like the stuff coming out right now, it's like, why are you hitting against that? Like, I wish it was more, instead of like, sort of like, now don't do those liturgical abuses. Like, no, like, hey, let's reinstitute ad orientem, because it just shows it's like, I'm focused on this not being a celebrity at a show. Let's reinstitute the railing, not because we need to get those people down on their knees. It's like, no, we're all equal, side by side, receiving our Lord. Like, you're at the gates of heaven and earth. Like, just to emphasize that, as opposed to it's another community gathering on a Sunday morning, and whether you're at Denny's or here, it really doesn't matter.
Well,
it's like,
that's what. Yeah, I agree. I mean, the ordinary at church, I attend the ordinary liturgy, is ad orientem. We have a communion rail, receive communion kneeling, on the tongue with intinction in the precious blood. We have a paid choir director. We have a choir. It's gorgeous. Lots and lots of Anglican chant. Tons of incense at about 4 different points in the Mass. And yet it's all in English. Sure. And it's dialogical. The priest says, we respond. And, which in many ways, to me, it's very close to what I think the Council Fathers had in mind when they thought of liturgical reform. They said, okay, vernacular for a pastoral reason, maybe, and that was the wedge in through which, the Latin went away. Okay, fine, we can debate that. But, a chant should be included in beauty and so on. So yeah, there. It doesn't have to be the traditional Latin Mass in order. That's the point, to reinstitute some of these elements. And I agree with you. The reintroduction of the altar rail and receiving communion kneeling, you think, oh, that places the laity in a position of subservience, and it creates a barrier between the sanctuary and the people. You know what? Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
it does, and it should, because there should the liturgy. Hear me out. The liturgy, the Eucharist, is not. Jesus doesn't magically coagulate on the plate out of our common bond of fellowship for each other. Okay, this is not a fellowship meal all by itself. We're not in a Boy Scout hall. We're not at a Rotary Club meeting here. We are here because Christ is coming to us as a gift, and it is a gift not of our making. Something sacred is going up there that is a divine gift through the priest, who is also not of his own making, all right, but has been called and ordained sacramentally by the church. And thus it is Christ through the church who gives this priest to the congregation. And so, yes, we make a line of demarcation between the sanctuary and the rest of the congregation, not because the priest is superior to the people, but because Christ is, in a sense, all right?
Absolutely.
Something sacred is going up there, and we want to differentiate it from the ordinariness out here, which is why also the language of the Mass should be a bit more elevated, I think. Therefore, I applaud the translations that came out, like a decade or so ago now.
Yeah, it was because 2011, because it was
the language should be elevated. Yeah, we shouldn't use the same language that I use in an elevator when I'm joking about somebody who just farted or something. All right. Yeah. It's got to be different than the pedestrian language of everydayness. Maybe even with a lot of these and thous, as in the ordinary liturgy. Anyway, I
completely
I'm pontificating now.
No, yeah. and I think it's worth the pontificating, because that doesn't mean that like it's not an attempt to make it so, the priest sits above everyone else, and no, I mean, honestly, I think ad orientem, it's like a recognition that it really doesn't matter which one of us it is. It's just it's a priest. Like, and I mean, I'm not turning my back on anybody. Like, ultimately, it kind of helps with the vanity. I'm not on display. It's not about me. I'm just praying and really striving to be there. And then it's beautiful, because it really brings about it emphasizes those moments when I turn around and say, the peace of the Lord be with you always. It's like, why am I? It's not because I'm peaceful and here's my peace. It's coming from Christ, and I'm like standing in the middle as a mediator to get to do that. The other thing I think too, and I think these couple of things are related. I think the sense of mystery is so important, because it's so lacking from the world today. Like, I feel like there's a connection, and I want to look into this and maybe write about it at some point. Like the connection between like the mystery of, say, like, like the chalice veil and like having things, mysterious, and recognizing like we don't understand everything that's going on there. Like it is a mystery we can continue to dive into. And like the removal of those sort of things, and also like immodesty, and the removal of like the mystery of the other human person sitting next to me. And just how it's like we don't appreciate the mystery of those around us in the same way that we're not appreciating the mystery of Christ. And I think the more that gets lost, the more we move into sloth and Acadia and not caring anymore and not just seeing how beautiful things can be.
Yeah.
It's like just this whole like arrogance of our modern era where we think we know it all because we have Google. And it's like, no, like there is a deep mystery in the human being sitting next to you, and horizontally speaking, and then vertically speaking, looking up at the altar, at the tabernacle.
That's why I think I could not agree more about the importance of mystery, and why my big bugaboo isn't just with regard to the quality of the liturgy itself, but with the complete disgusting degradation of church architecture.
Sure.
That didn't begin with the council. Go back, and some of the worst churches I've ever seen in my life are ones built in the 50s, in the immediate post-war era, in the United States. Just a horrible lack of attention to the vertical mystery dimension, and this horrific tendency that's set in, which is that first we build the school and we hold mass in the school cafeteria, and then suddenly the school cafeteria simply becomes the church. They never get around to actually building a church. Then becomes the church, and they build a new school cafeteria. I mean, I know a parish near me that's like that. Completely low ceilings, regular windows, no stained glass, tile floor. It just screams out, well, where's my cheeseburger?
Yeah.
Gothic architecture, to me, in my mind, is the high point of Catholic Church architecture, because it soars to the heavens, and we need to retrieve the lost art of art. All right, stained glass, statuary. I think church architecture, I think church ceilings should be high. There should be an accentuation of natural elements, wood and stone. There should be an accentuation of color, as in stained glass. Altar rails, statues of saints. Hey, you know what? Votive candles. Yeah. If I see another church, maybe you can tell me for insurance purposes, and pardon me if you do.
No. We
with
have
electric votive candles.
I can't stand them either. I know, and we don't have them. We have actual candles.
Although the symbolism is fire. The fire is and fire is a universal symbol that is across all religions, as is chant, and there's a reason for that. Again, I don't want to go into it now, but a flickering electric light bulb is not the same symbol. I'm sorry.
It's absolutely not. I'll tell you too, just as a kind of a confession. So I got to this parish in 2014. The parish was built in 2009. It's a beautiful church. If you go on our website, you can do like a whole 3D tour. It's beautiful. They did a great job. When I first got here and was buried in debt, I was thinking, why didn't we just start in the gym and then move over to the church when we could afford it? Now,
I have no problem with that, by the way.
No, I get it.
It's just honestly, that they stay in the gym.
I know. At this point, though, because we're and this really helped. About a year and a half ago, we switched from a capital campaign prayer at the end of Mass that I had written that wasn't anything great. We switched to the Memorare and just said, here's the thing. We're going to ask our Blessed Mother to help us. And then when we're done with the debt, and we will be, we'll keep praying this and just ask her for another intention. And lo and behold, like we had 2 pretty good sized gifts come in. Although like this hasn't been just like a couple of big donors. Like our parish is really contributing and moving on, but like now we're at like 750,000, which, like I said, when I got here was 5.5 million, and it just feels like you can never move. But at this point, I'm grateful that they did what they did, not only because now it would be like however much more to build because we live in an insane time, but like it's a beautiful church. I've been able to pray in there this whole time, and I mean it's glorious. And I mean, how long did it used to take them to build cathedrals? 50, 100 years,
sometimes longer.
Yeah, and so now we're able to move quicker, and it's like, okay, we're gonna do our best. Like, where are we willing to put our money? It's like, well, let's do it for the church, and let's build churches that are more beautiful than our malls. It's like,
I think this is an important point. Lay people are busy, priests are busy, bishops are busy, everybody gets busy. And rightly so. I mean, we're all doing proper things, good things, but we can lose the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
And the fact is, and I'm guilty of this too, the central focus of every Catholic parish should be the Eucharistic liturgy on Sunday. Absolutely. Which means, why do we not pour more resources into that? Why do we pour financial resources into so many other things? I'm thinking, for example, of my parish, which is a small ordinary parish, and yet we have a full-time paid choir director.
Sure.
And it makes all the difference in the world. Now, I'm not saying you need to do that. Every parish needs to do that. I'm just throwing that out as an example of my parish made an investment in this precisely because it understood how important the Sunday liturgy is to this parish and how important a choir is. Now, we don't have a paid choir. It's not a professional choir.
Sure.
But this full-time choir director, Paul Campbell is his name, gets the most magnificent sound out of just these volunteers, these kids and adults. It's amazing.
That's
Something
beautiful.
simple like that.
Yeah.
Instead of, okay, so many parishes do this, and I know a lot of them. All right, we pay an organist, and he or she comes in, and they select the music beforehand from a gather hymnal or whatever. It's largely a bunch of unsingable songs that nobody knows or cares about. And then since nobody's singing, the organ just then pounds and drowns out nothing's being drowned out. It's just that people are sitting there listening to the organ pound away. And there's no singing, nothing's going on, and everyone's just happy. And that's my theory as to why Catholics don't like hymns to go longer than 2 verses, because they're not singing the darn things anyway. Can we just get the heck out of here? I was just recently at a parish where it was 4th of July or something, or 4th of July weekend, and the guy who was pounding away on the organ decided to play America the Beautiful as a recessional hymn. He decided to play all like 8 verses of it, I guess. I didn't even know there were that many verses to America the Beautiful. But was hysterical were the number of people who, after the second verse, he cranks up the third verse, and people just walking out of the pews and going out the door. It's like, hey, buddy, this is a Catholic church. It's 2 verses.
It's 2 verses. That's all you get.
2. That's it. Even it's a song about the Trinity. We're just going through the Son. Forget the Spirit. We're done.
And it's funny. I know, like, Sing of Mary. That's often like we just use that for our school mass. I don't know, was it yesterday we used it? But, it's just like the second verse just ends on when on Calvary he died, and it's just like, and then like we got to keep going. No, we have a wonderful sacred music director, and and I get it. Yeah, I mean it's you got to put it all together. And the one other thing I would add to that, because I completely agree with you, we got to pay attention to and invest in the Sunday liturgy. I mean, it's the heart of it all. Yes. The other thing I would say, so we've got a wonderful, we call him our director of operations. He's like my right-hand man. Helps me with so much of the business operations of the parish. Has his degree from Belmont Abbey in theology, just got an MBA, wonderful young man. And I can rely on him for so many day-to-day business things, and that's freed me for more confessions. I think that's the other thing, that you got to make the time for confessions. Like, I'm probably on average outside of Advent and Lent hearing 7 to 8 hours a week. And that's crucial. And it's the field of dreams principle. If you build it, they will come. If you just get in there, and you can't do the by appointment. Now, I have learned over the years, because I used to completely like poo-poo the whole appointment thing. There are people who really want appointments. Fine. Call them, make an appointment. We'll do it. But by and large, like 7 to 8, I mean, after every daily mass, I like to say confessions here are like Chick-fil-A, every day but Sunday. Like we're in there. Wednesday night is a good setup, and that really takes the pressure off. Saturday is like the traditional day. We have mass in the evening. I expose the Blessed Sacrament. It's all night adoration, and I go in the confessional until there's no more line. So I mean, there's times I'm in there 2-3 hours, and it's great. I mean, it's like people get to go, but you got to
build it. They will come.
Exactly.
I've often said, offer. Like our ordinary parish, our pastor has confessions before every mass, starting a half an hour before every mass. And if he runs out of time, which he often does, then he offers confessions after mass for anybody that didn't get a chance to go until mass started. Anywhere you see a parish that offers mass confession right before mass, you see lines of people.
Oh, of course.
Waiting to go to confess. What's the most ridiculous thing of all? in terms of confession time for a lay person, right, is to 2:30 on a Saturday afternoon for 20 minutes.
Of course.
Okay.
The 20-minute thing, it's sort of like the uninvite. It's like, come on,
Yeah.
you gotta get more than that. Like,
Or as I once had a pastor, I actually liked him. He was a good guy, but he was notoriously late to everything. So Saturday afternoon confessions at 2:30, and he wouldn't show up until 3:15. By that time, everybody else had left, and I'm just sitting there going, well, I guess he'll be here soon. And I read a book or something, and sure enough, he'd blow it. Sorry. I said to him once in confession, because I liked the guy, we had a good relationship. I said, would you be 45 minutes late to Mass? Well, no. Have you ever been 45 minutes late to Mass? No. And yet you're routinely 45 minutes late to confession. What do you think that communicates to a layperson waiting to go to confession? This is optional. Don't need it. Who cares?
Exactly. And actually, so that's why I put them after the Mass, because like beforehand, praying, get ready. But it's like the Saturday afternoon thing. So I've been by myself here. I'm in my 5th year of being alone, which is fine. It's great. But, it's like, I know that if I'm in there for an hour before the Saturday evening Mass, I'm starting to think like, okay, I gotta hurry up and get out there. And I don't want to do that to a penitent, because inevitably it's like 4:17, we have 4:30 Mass. I'm like, okay, I could take one more. They come in, Father, it's been 30 years. Like, I don't, like, I can't do that right now and give it justice.
Yeah. Well, that's why I think some people do like the appointment, because, okay,
Oh, sure.
I know. I mean, I was in line for confession just a couple of weeks ago, and there was a lady ahead of me, and it was her turn to go next. And she goes, I'm going to go to the back of the line. This is a Saturday afternoon confession. St. Anne Basilica here in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And she said, because I'm going to be here for like 30 minutes. So, 30, 35, 45. So she politely, but that's why people like appointments.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's lovely, and it's nice when that happens. But yeah, it's just, I like the after the Mass, because I try not to schedule anything for a decent block. And, then that way it's like, you're not rushed. I mean, and you can give people more time, and you're not thinking, okay, I got to get ready for the Mass and be prepping for that. Rather, it's like, okay, appointments. I mean, it's very rare that I'm late to an appointment because I was in the confessional too long.
Yeah,
it's happened.
Yeah,
but it usually works out pretty well that way.
Hey, look, I'm actually, this is the first in me giving these interviews. There's somebody knocking at my door for some strange reason. I hear my neighbors out talking. So now my curiosity is piqued as to what is there something going down in the hood? I need to know if there's something going down in the hood. But anyway, but we have been talking for an hour and 10 minutes. And so we probably should wrap up anyway, so I can go find what's going on in the hood.
Absolutely.
But hey, it's been fantastic talking to you again. There's so much more. I still want to talk with you about the synodal process, what your parish is doing. I want to talk about how does a parish priest work at retaining young people in the church. We know they're leaving in droves. What's that all about? What can we do about that? So that will be a part 3 with Father Eckert.
I'll look forward to it.
Become a regular on here. All right, so I'm going to hit because I love talking to you. Mainly because you agree with everything I say. So that's good. All right, thanks everybody, and until next time, bye.
Thanks so much.